we're overstimulated right before we go to bed. Having certain boundaries in place with your phone, I think, is so important. That boundary was a set time. It's 10 p.m., not 10:01, not 10:05, not 11. Unless the world is on fire, I am not answering a single text. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Dream Bigger podcast. So today I'm here with a solo, and I'm back with the series that I did last year that you guys really loved, and it is the Glow Up series. So I love to end my year with this specific series just because I can give you guys really specific tangible tips that you can apply in order to start your year off right. So I'm dividing it up into different themes. In today's one, I'm talking about how to become a morning person because this was a highly requested episode from you guys. You guys all wanted something on how to become a morning person, and let me tell you, I was not born a morning person. I was in fact not a morning person at all, and so I've kind of put together certain systems that have worked for me that I hope can help you as well if that's a journey that you're on. And then other episodes that I'm going to do in the Glow Up series are going to be goals and habits and vision boards and essentially just things that you can do to start your year off really strong. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So as I said, the episode is how to become a morning person. Now, look, I think everyone has kind of a vision to become a morning person, but sometimes they just don't have the systems to get there. And that's all that it is. And also, the other thing that I want to preface this by saying is that I think it's okay to be flexible about the type of morning person you are throughout the year. So I like to think that life comes in seasons, and certain seasons are more social than others. Others are more like grounded in wellness. And I think being able to adapt based on the season of life you're in is really important. And that is why it's important to have specific non-negotiables in your morning routine, which is something that I will get into. But before we even get there, I think a good morning routine actually starts with your evening routine, because if you're not well rested enough, then you are simply not going to be able to wake up in the morning and feel energetic, okay? So these are the overarching tips that have really helped me have a good wind down routine so that I can, in fact, wake up in the morning and be really fresh and ready for the day. So the first thing I think is really important that I just don't think enough of us do, and I implemented this year, and I think it has been single-handedly one of the best habits I've implemented, and that is phone office hours. So we all have office hours, whether it's for work or like whatever it is, right? Like you're not constantly on the clock, and I feel like our phones are this thing that it's just so readily available that we feel like it's okay to be on it 24/7, whether we're scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or, answering texts or Slacks or emails or whatever it is, right? And so what I like to do is have my phone office hours end at 10 p.m. every night, which means that after 10 p.m., unless the world is on fire, I am not answering a single text, a Slack. I'm not even looking on Slack. I don't want to look at my emails. I am definitely not scrolling on social. And the reason I started to do this is because I found that I was extremely overstimulated before I was going to bed. And I was like, okay, I know that being on my phone before bed is not good for me. So what am I doing here? Let me try. It was a 1-week experiment where I was like, I'm just going to put my phone away at 10 p.m. every night, as in I'm not going to look at it for all work or social or whatever. And I was shocked at, number one, how much more relaxed I felt before going to bed. And number two, how drastically my quality of sleep improved. So I don't think you need to hear me say that our screens have a direct impact in terms of the kind of sleep that we're getting just because of the light, and number two, because of the content that we're consuming. We're overstimulated right before we go to bed, which kind of delays how quickly we fall asleep and also the kind of sleep that we're getting. And so having certain boundaries in place with your phone, I think, is so important. And so for me, that boundary was a set time. It's 10 p.m., not 10:01, not 10:05, not 11. It doesn't matter the day of the week. My phone is off. My phone is, or not off, but it's away from me at 10. I'm just not using it anymore. And having that hard boundary, like that timing boundary, was enough for me. If, the timing boundary doesn't work for you, then have like a social media blocking app on your phone. Like Nish uses Opal, which he really likes. There's all kinds of different ways that you can establish that boundary with your phone, but I highly recommend you kind of come up with what that boundary is, because I cannot explain how monumental of an impact it's had on me. Also, it helps you get to bed earlier. So say, for example, you're on your phone, there's no boundaries, you have, you can just you were just with your phone and you're scrolling. I feel like you can scroll till kingdom comes, and then it's like 1 a.m. before you know it. You've scrolled on TikTok for 2 hours before bed, and then you go to bed at 1 and you have to wake up at 8, and then you're tired. You know what I mean? So I feel like this has been really helpful, which brings me to my second point, is having a bedtime and sticking to it. Okay. So how I like to explain this is, I remember as a kid, and I know most of us do, we all had bedtimes, okay? And then somewhere along the way, as we became an adult, we didn't have like a set bedtime anymore. And so it's kind of become this flexible thing where, on certain days you go to bed at this time, and then on others you go to bed at that time, and then you wake up in the morning and you're tired, or you're wondering why you have to snooze your alarm. It's because you're tired, right? So for me, having a bedtime has been, again, a strict boundary, and that's just how I personally like to operate. I feel like it just helps me adhere to like whatever goals I'm setting out to accomplish, right? So having that set bedtime, it just made sure that, okay, I would wake up in the morning and I'm just going to be well rested, and I'm not going to be like groggy or tired or anything like that. So my hard bedtime is 11. I will not sleep after 11, okay? It's going to be lights out at 11, preferably 10:30, but I've given myself that grace of a half hour in case, there's like a social thing on the weekday, or I don't know, an important work thing comes up that Nish and I really need to discuss. So that's why I gave myself the buffer of 11, but it was 10:30 for the longest time. And if I'm being honest, 10:30 worked better for me. I have just kind of like been a little bit more lax and have brought it out to 11. I think, honestly speaking, in January, I'm going to bring it back to 10:30. Right now, it's just more social and chaotic because of Q4 with Array, and then just like regular social things. But I'm bringing it back to 10:30 in January. Okay, so that's just my personal goal. And then that brings me to having a wind down routine before bed. Okay, so I think having a way to bookend your day and kind of separate yourself from like the day-to-day mundane and like transition into bedtime is super, super important. So for me, that wind down routine, like an important part of that is reading. I have found that reading before bed, I sleep so much better, and it is the best way for me to detach from what is currently going on in my life and go into this like in-between world before I go to sleep. Okay, so I'm gonna now take you through my exact routine like in the evening before bed. So you guys know or if you have heard other episodes of the podcast, you'll know that I do an evening workout. So I work out from 5 to 6 typically on most days, except Fridays, which is like 4 to 5. But on most days, I work out from 5 to 6. So I come home from the gym and I typically eat dinner around 7 p.m. Nish goes to the gym at 7. So we actually eat at different times. Okay. So again, like I have my dinner, I do my thing. During this time, I while I'm eating my dinner, I can be doing a number of different things. Sometimes it's catching up on work or emails. Sometimes it's catching up on Slack. If my work day is like kind of like done and dusted, then I can watch YouTube. I will call my brother or like my parents. It just depends on my vibe, but that 7 p.m. time is like just my time for me. Then Nish typically comes home by like 8:15, sometimes 8:30, but typically closer to 8:15. And so when he comes home, I sit with him while he eats dinner. And that's just some time that we take to hang out. Either like on weekdays, typically it is like quite work related, especially right now, given the time of year, it's just insanely busy. And so we have a lot of work to talk about, and during the day we don't get time to meet, so we'll typically do that at dinner time. But if we're just both really exhausted, then it'll just be like, this is our time to hang out. Obviously this routine changes throughout the year, because when it was light out later, Nish and I would go for a walk when he'd get home from the gym, even though it was like 8:15, 8:30, because it would stay bright out later. Now it's dark out so much sooner. And so we just hang out at home while he eats dinner. And then around 9 p.m. is when I head to the shower. So I take a shower and then I just get ready for bed. So, just quick, I'm not washing my hair on anything on most weekdays. And so it's just me doing like a quick body shower after the gym, and then doing my skincare and just getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, all of that. And then I would say between 9:45 to 10, remember at 10 p.m. is when I no longer look at my phone, but between 9:45 to 10 is when I get into bed. And if I am in bed at 9:45 and I have that 15-minute buffer period before I have to put my phone away altogether, I actually go on Pinterest and I look at outfit inspiration for the next day, or just like something fun like that. Like maybe if I'm going on vacation somewhere, like I'll like look at spots that I should go to, like for food or shopping or whatever it is. So I like to spend a little bit of time on Pinterest. I feel like it's like a really nice way to unplug, and it's not quite so stimulating to me as Instagram or TikTok or any of these other apps. So I love like a little 15-minute time on YouTube. Sorry, not on YouTube, on Pinterest. And then from 10 p.m. until I go to bed, which is, as I said, between 10:30 to 11. If Nish is busy doing his own thing, then I typically just read. So that reading time goes either 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how I'm feeling, how interesting the book is, how tired I am. And yeah, by 11 p.m., by between 10:30 to 11 p.m., I am exhausted and ready to go to bed. So that is my full breakdown of my evening routine. The one thing that I will say is that for me personally, I read fiction before bed. I've talked about this before. I used to be this person who felt like I needed to be reading nonfiction if I was reading. And I realized that by reading nonfiction before bed, my mind was still extremely stimulated. I would continue to think about the workday, or like if it was non-business related books, and I would just be thinking about how I can implement those things, or like I was still absorbing that information, if that makes sense. Like I was learning, right? And so I noticed that I wasn't sleeping as well. And so a few years ago, I was like, okay, I want to go back to reading fiction. And mind you, I'm someone who grew up reading a lot. So it's not like fiction books are something that was new to me. It's just a habit that I kind of like left behind because I was like, waste of time. Stupid, by the way. If you think that way, it's a stupid thought. So put it away. So I just decided that I was going to read fiction before bed because it was a good way for me to detach from my regular day. And I cannot explain to you the impact that it's had on my sleep and how much joy it brings me to just read for pleasure, I've talked about this before, but like, I'm not a big TV watcher because I'm just someone who inherently enjoys reading more. And so for me to have the time to read fiction books it's a replacement for TV almost, or it's the equivalent of TV for me. It's just a way for my mind to kind of wander, and it's my favorite time. Like I really look forward to my bedtime because I get to read fiction now. So if you are someone with that same thought process that like, oh, I will only allow myself to read if it's nonfiction and I'm learning something, just know that it's okay for you to read for fun, and it's good to read fiction. It like helps your mind wander. Also, I think that there's so much that can be learned from fiction books. I feel like all these character dynamics, there's like, I don't know, there's so much in there. You can learn from characters too, not just real life humans. So I love reading fiction before bed. If it's something that you guys have been thinking about, let this be your sign to do exactly that. Okay, so now let's move on to morning routine, okay? Water before I do. Okay, so in order to have a strong morning routine, I have found that the most important thing is to wake up at the same time every single day, okay? So it's the same as your bedtime that you've established. Your wake up time should be timed so it's like you're getting basically enough sleep in between your bedtime and your wake up time. So for me, that is typically like 8-ish hours. And so I wake up every day at 6:45-ish, like 6:45 to 6:50. That's kind of my general wake up time. And you should be crafting your wake up time based as well. Like an important factor is your weekend patterns, okay? So your weekend wake up time should be 90 minutes to 2 hours after your weekday wake up time. Does this make sense? I hope so. Otherwise, you have something called social jet lag. So if you're curious about what this means exactly, I would recommend that you read a book called, oh God, I'm forgetting the name of the book. The author is Dr. Michael Bruce. Hold on. Right. Okay. This is what it is. So it's a book called The Power of When. It's by Dr. Michael Bruce, and he is a sleep specialist. He's a sleep doctor. And in it, he talks about how social jet lag is a thing that most of us deal with because typically, if you think about it, let's say on a weekday, you have work at 9, you wake up at 7 or 8, let's say. And then on the weekend, you have a late night and then you end up waking up at 11 a.m. That's like a big discrepancy in terms of when you're normally waking up versus your weekend wake up time. And that kind of has a downstream effect on when you're sleeping on the weekend. And then you're just perpetually in this like tired state and you're like trying to catch up on sleep. So instead of doing that, make sure that your wake up time, even on weekdays, is about 90 minutes before you would wake up on a weekend, which also means that you should have in mind typically like your weekend activity. So for me, on a weekend, unless it's like, I don't know, a special occasion, and for example, like right now, I had a Halloween party a couple of weekends ago, and at that time I slept at like 1, but or like 2, but that's an outlier for me. Typically on the weekend, I still sleep around midnight. And so this kind of routine works really well for me because then on a weekday, I'm able to wake up still by 8:45-ish or like I would say like 8:30 typically I'm up and still be fine. I fall into this window and I'm good. So kind of crafting your wake up time based on how you generally live your life is really important. And the other thing that I will say is that I don't think we place enough emphasis on how important good sleep really is. And so, if you have this really aggressive morning routine, it's not a badge of honor to do that if you're compromising on the hours that you're sleeping. Like having good sleep, having high quality sleep is, I would argue, more important than having a strong morning routine, because who cares if you're waking up at 5 but you're tired? Like absolutely not, So just make sure that you are getting enough sleep. I honestly cannot explain this enough. So anyway, you have your wake up time, which works with your weekend plans as well. And then the other thing is to craft a morning routine that you really love. Okay. So I wasn't always a morning person, but I think what got me really excited about my morning routine, and I will actually take you all the way back to 2015. That's when I decided I needed to become a morning person. And so it's been 10 years of this, but I remember what would get me really excited about the morning was I would go to a cafe, like a coffee shop near me, and I would take my journal there and then I would drink coffee and journal in the coffee shop. And it was before the coffee shop was crowded. It was before I felt the world was awake. And I was always the first person at my local cafe. And it would just get me so excited to wake up in the morning. And so whatever that is for you, find it, right? It doesn't have to be going to your local coffee shop or anything like that. It can be doing something fun at home, right? So for me now, obviously, that's completely changed. Now, the thing that gets me really excited and like looking forward to getting out of bed is the fact that I get to wake up, make my coffee, and I love making my coffee in the morning. It is such a nice ritual that I have in the morning. I love the smell of my coffee and I love like grinding my beans and all of that. It's like a very ritualistic kind of time for me to spend time with myself. And I love doing that, and I love to sit with my journal and journal. Like that is just something that I take a lot of joy in every single morning. And so I think that you should find whatever it is that gets you excited to wake up in the morning and have that time to yourself, because that's what you have in the morning. I mean, of course, listen, like I'm not a mom, like I don't have kids or anything like that yet, but right now the time that I have in the morning is for me, and that is very sacred. And so I want to do the things that make me really happy at that time of day. So, and also the other thing is that when it comes to your morning routine, it's also important for you to have non-negotiables, right? Because as I said, our life goes through seasons. And so while at certain times you may be waking up at 6 or 5 or whatever that time is, like super early, maybe at a different time of year, you are waking up a little bit later. And so your morning routine gets cut short. So identify what your non-negotiables are and make sure you always have room for those two things, one or two things in your morning routine. So as an example, my two non-negotiables are journaling and a walk in the morning. Okay. I will not skip those two things. And so even if I only have 30 minutes in the morning, I can get those two things in. Okay. So, you don't need to beat yourself up if you don't have like 2-3 hours for a morning routine. Like, quite frankly, it's not realistic for a lot of us. At one point in my life, I was someone who could wake up at 5:30 and have a 3-hour long morning routine. That's no longer the case for me, and that's okay. You know, as I said, we go through seasons in life, and you kind of have to embrace that. So here is my exact morning routine, okay? So I wake up, as I said, between 6:45 to 6:50, and the first thing that I do when I get up is I go to the bathroom, do my skincare, kind of like brush my teeth, all of that, and then I go to my closet and I get dressed, okay? So I do this before I leave the bedroom area to go to my kitchen and make my coffee and all of that. I just find that getting dressed is something that is really important for me. It makes me feel like I have a purpose in life. I'm not someone who can just go in my pajamas to do the rest of my day. It's just not how I operate. So getting dressed first works for me. So after I get dressed, and by dressed, I don't mean I have my makeup on yet. That's later. But I mean just like literally getting dressed in like the outfit that I'm wearing. And I've done my skincare and my sunscreen and all of that. And then I go to my kitchen and I make my coffee. As I said, this is a routine that I really look forward to. If you're curious, I have a Breville machine, like a Breville coffee machine where you manually grind the beans. But it's built in within the coffee machine, if that makes sense. So I pour beans in, it like grinds it. And then I take like the ground beans that are in like, I don't know what it's called, filter or whatever, and then you put it into the other one and then the coffee comes. Okay, does that make sense? I hope so. And I personally love La Colombe beans. That is my favorite. When we got our coffee machine, I tried a few different ones. I've always been like a big La Colombe coffee fan. And so having that at home is to me the biggest luxury. And not to go on a tangent, but I cannot explain the amount of money I have saved by doing this, because I rarely, and I truly do mean rarely, ever get a coffee from outside. I don't feel the need to do it because my coffee at home is so freaking good. So anyway, I make my coffee and then I sit down and journal. And actually, before I drink my coffee, even I do like a very large glass of water, and I take my MB1 and Tribiotic and so like right now, because it's cold and flu season, I also do wellness formula. So those are the 3 things that I always take. And then I sit down and I journal, and I usually give myself about 15 to 20 minutes. However long it takes me to finish my coffee is how long I journal. Typically it's 1 to 1.5 pages, sometimes 2, depending on how I'm feeling. And I look at my phone only after journaling. Okay, so this again goes back to the phone office hours that I was talking about. It's really important, again, to have those boundaries even in the morning, because I feel like if you wake up and you're looking at social media right away, I feel like I'm the most creative in the morning, and I don't want other people's opinions or content to influence how I'm thinking. And so to have that time for my mind to just wander and think on its own before external influences, I think it's just really important. That's like my time for me, and I don't want anything else in my way. And also, I should add, I put my phone on Do Not Disturb at night, which means that when I wake up, it's not like 100 notifications on my phone screen. It still looks calm, even though the notifications are all hiding, basically. Thank God for that function, honestly speaking. So I have that boundary with my phone as well, that I only look at my social media after I finish journaling. And then I go for a 20 to 30 minute walk. And during this time, I listen to a podcast or a book. And again, I like to listen to something that'll be value add for me at that time, because I feel like mornings are when you are absorbing the most information. And I don't know, I think the content that you consume at that time really does determine how you feel throughout the rest of the day, which is why as well, I am someone who does not watch the news for this reason. I've never watched the news. When my parents used to do it, my dad wakes up and watches the news, and I feel like it has like very bad energy, because a lot of what you're presented in the news, I think it's just very sensationalized, and it's meant to rouse emotions in you. And I don't want that in the morning. Like, I absolutely do not want that, actually, at all. I will only consume news if it comes up or someone brings it up to me, and then I'll read more into it. But in the morning, absolutely not. I do not want that energy to cloud my day. I don't know. It's just not the vibe for me. So that's kind of how I function. Like, like the information that I'm taking in is like a real value add. And then by 8:30 a.m., I'm home, and I either film videos or start the workday with emails. So, for example, today I think I had a call at 8:30. Yeah, so like typically, like, I try not to schedule calls before 9, but certain days that does happen. So this week, for example, I think I've had 3 out of 5 days I've had calls at 8:30. So again, I'm home at 8:30 and I can take those calls. And sometimes as well, if the call is something that doesn't require me to be in front of my screen, then I just have a longer walk, and I will continue to walk while I take that call. So it just helps me get a lot of steps out of the way as well. So these are all of my tips for being a morning person. Obviously, again, you kind of have to figure out what works for you, what brings you joy. This should be something that like makes you happy and excited. And also know that in terms of the time that you wake up in the morning, don't feel like you have to wake up at 5:30 or 6 or you're a failure. You know, you can have a morning routine even if you wake up at 8 or 8:30. Just, it's about those like few non-negotiables. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that it's of value to you, and that we all have a glowed up 2025, you know? And I will talk to you next week. Bye.